I, 28 male, recently divorced my ex-wife, 25 female, after 2 years of marriage. The first time I met my wife was in college. I was ahead of her in class, and shortly after we became friends, I graduated, but my wife and I kept in touch. Fortunately, things went smoothly for me, and I was able to get a good-paying job months after I graduated from college. By this time, my wife and I had gotten closer, and occasionally, I would support her financially so she could take care of things she needed to. Even though we were not dating, we got intimate, and it was more of a friends with benefits relationship. But as time passed, I fell in love with her, and we were officially dating in no time. While we dated, our relationship had a lot of ups and downs, and I should have considered this a red flag, but because I was deeply in love with her, I thought my influence would rub off on her, and she would change with time. I wasn't the kind of boyfriend who always fought or argued, but my wife was. She argued about everything, including the ones that should not have led to an argument. She was more of a defensive person and was never wrong, even though she was always at fault. Eventually, we dated for 2 years after breaking up a couple of times, and later on, we married. Aside from her defensive nature and inability to control her anger, my wife was a good person. She took care of me, satisfied my needs, and took care of our home too. She was also good with money management, which was the one skill I didn't have. In the first year of our marriage, something happened that almost scattered our marriage. So, there was this female colleague of mine that I was close to. We used to have lunch together, and most times, I would drop her at her home after work, but my wife never liked this idea. She knew my colleague well, and no matter how I tried to explain to her that there was nothing between my colleague and me, she wouldn't listen. One day after work, I offered to drop a few of my colleagues at the bus station like I usually did, and this female friend of mine opted to sit in front with me. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my wife jumped out from where she was hiding and assaulted my female colleague. She created a terrible scene at my workplace, and I was almost fired because of her actions. My wife badly injured my female colleague, and she even had her hair pulled out. Ultimately, I had to pay all the hospital bills and begged my colleague not to press charges. That was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, and even after I went home to confront my wife, she showed no remorse. She claimed she knew I was cheating on her and called me all kinds of names. I didn't understand where all that was coming from because I had never cheated on her, not even when we were dating. I tried my best to remain faithful, but at the slightest opportunity she had, she would accuse me of cheating on her. It didn't just end there. She invaded my privacy all the time. I would often wake up to see her going through my phone, and if I yelled at her, she would hand me her phone and say I could go through it too. For 2 years, I tolerated all that, thinking that my wife acted that way because she was insecure and didn't want another woman to snatch me from her because she loved me so much. I didn't know she had been steadily cheating on me and fooling me the whole time. Also, when she handed me her phone so I could go through it, I didn't go through it because I believed she had nothing to hide. Meanwhile, she had skeletons in her closet. The kind of work I did included traveling from time to meet with my clients, and each time I announced to my wife that I would be traveling soon, it always led to a fight. The main reason it always led to a fight was because my wife claimed I barely spent time with her, and she didn't like that I had to travel all the time. So, the last time I traveled, this was before I discovered how much of a hypocrite she was. I wrapped up what I had to do with my client a day earlier, and I decided to go home and surprise my wife since she wasn't so happy that I traveled. When I got home, the house was quiet, but I noticed a pair of sneakers in my living room that wasn't mine, and as I walked down the corridor, I saw a shirt just outside our bedroom door. Our bedroom was slightly shut, and as I opened to see what was going on, I saw my wife and my closest college friend in bed together. They were both naked and all cuddled up, and they were both deeply asleep and snoring, indicating that they just did it. Geez, I was so shocked and heartbroken, and I could not believe that my wife, who accused me several times of cheating on her when I was innocent, was actually cheating on me with my friend. At that moment, I wanted to hit the hell out of them, but I realized that doing that would only add salt to the injury. So I took out my phone and took several pictures of them and left the house. While they slept, I sent their pictures to my wife's family WhatsApp group chat, and sent them to our close circle of friends and even the people who knew my college friend. By the time they woke up, almost everyone I knew and they knew had their pictures, and they sent them a lot of angry messages. Shortly after my wife realized what was happening, she called me to ask if I had received any pictures from any number, and I told her I gave her up that evening to take her things and leave my house. When I said that, she knew I was the one, and instead of being all defensive like I expected her to be, she started begging me on the phone. She said it wasn't what I thought, and that she could not explain how it happened, but I didn't fall for anything she said. After I sent my friends the pictures, some of them began to tell me they knew about my wife's infidelity. I was so shocked that some of my friends knew my wife and friend were cheating on me, but they never said anything. I was so angry, and I blocked them and cut them off completely. As for my wife, she begged me to not make any decision that would destroy our marriage, despite destroying it with her infidelity. I was already sick of her and her manipulation and didn't think twice before divorcing her. Someone here mentioned it before, and I'd love to reiterate that some women are not worth the sacrifices men make for them. It's still difficult to believe that while I was trying my best to be a good husband to her, my wife had been cheating on me from the first year of our marriage, and I never suspected anything. She went as far as painting me as the bad guy all the time. Meanwhile, she was having an affair right under my nose with my friend. Speaking of him, I cut ties with him, and as I share this story, I consider him dead to me, including my friends that watched as my wife cheated on me, but never said anything. I have made up my mind to never marry again. Marriage is not worth all the stress and drama, and it's better to be a single and free man than to be married to a manipulator and sick cheater. OP, you're totally right. It's better to be a single and free man than to be married to a cheat. Your wife was a manipulator. Sadly, you were blinded by love. To think that she kept accusing you of cheating on her when she was actually cheating on you is crazy. I'm glad your divorce ended this. It's bold of her to ask you not to make decisions that could ruin your marriage when she already did. You don't have to marry again if you don't want to. Do whatever makes you happy. Thank you for sharing with us. Let's now move on to the second story of the day. My wife and I were still very young in love when I discovered she was letting someone else tap her honeypot. My wife and I met in our hometown, and shortly after, I returned from college to settle down there. I loved her from first sight, and after several dates together, we started dating and married after dating for a year and 3 months. Meeting and marrying May was like a dream come true for me. She was the kind of girl I always wanted to settle with. She was hardworking, beautiful, intelligent, and fun to be with. There was never a dull moment with her, and I looked forward to waking up next to her every day. May was also a passionate lover. She loved me with everything in her, and while our marriage lasted, we barely fought or did anything to hurt each other. We lived in peace and harmony and treated each other respectfully. I was and still am a good man and ensured that I cared for May and provided her needs. May worked as a receptionist at a big fancy female store, and our earnings were enough to keep the house running. We never had any financial issues because we tried our best to live within our means, and throughout the 2 years we were married, we supported each other and pushed ourselves to find better jobs. With May, I felt fulfilled and looked forward to spending the rest of my life with her. She was a child at heart and had her way of adding colors to any place she went to. People loved May, and she was really popular amongst her friends. We lived in a small town, so there was hardly a place May, and I went to that she wasn't recognized, mainly because her father held a leadership position while she was in high school. Aside from being a great wife, May was also a great friend, and she had 2 best friends she often used to hang out with. Most times, they would decide to go on a weekend vacation or have their regular girls' night, and I never tried to stop her because I understood that it was normal for her to want to hang out with her friends, even when we were married. I also became friends with her best friends' husbands, so whenever May and her best friends went on vacation, the 3 of us would hang out together and spend time together. We did this for 2 years. May and I were married, and even when we would all hang out as a family unit, I never suspected that May was cheating on me with one of her best friends' husbands. Although I noticed she was close to one of them, I didn't think there was any extra. I thought he was the one she related with the most, and I kept believing this until I discovered a dark truth. One evening, May told me she was stepping out to hang out with the girls as usual, and I watched her as she prepared, wore a new dress she had recently bought, and did her makeup. She was always like that, and I didn't see anything off. I even gave her some cash in case she needed to buy anything for herself and her girlfriends. About an hour after she left, I was searching for my golden watch in our jewelry drawer when I found May's ring. I wasn't comfortable that she left her ring behind, and it was very unlike her to do so. So I tried to call her, and after calling her several times and she didn't pick up her call, I resorted to calling one of her best friends. On the first call, her best friend took the call, and when I asked her if I could speak with my wife, she told me May wasn't with her, and she said they weren't hanging out that night either. While I was trying to wrap my head around the fact that May lied to me and left her wedding ring at home, her best friend asked if her husband was with me. He wasn't, and I was surprised that she asked. She was shocked when I told her I had not seen her husband since the last time we all hung out. She said her husband told her he was going out with me for a drink that night, and it was weird that he wasn't with me. At this point, we realized that something was off, and we concluded that there was a possibility my wife and her husband were together since they coincidentally lied to us on the same night. To find her husband, she tried to check her husband's Snapchat location, but it was turned off, and when I checked May's Snapchat location, it was on, and we both decided to go down there. My heart nearly fell in my stomach when I realized that May's location was a hotel, and after asking a couple of questions, we found the hotel room May lodged in. Meanwhile, we started documenting my process of going to May's hotel room, and when I knocked on the door of the room she lodged in, and she opened it, she was beyond shocked to see me and her best friend there. She was naked underneath the bathrobe she was wearing, and her best friend's husband was lying in bed, expecting that she would attend to whoever knocked on the door and return to him. Immediately we got into the room, I started yelling at her while recording her, and she was so embarrassed. Her best friend was so upset that she hit her husband and attacked May for being a betrayer and homewrecker. May was so ashamed that she could not look me in the eye. She did not even try to explain. She only stood in one position with tears running down her cheeks. After I had recorded enough, I left with her best friend and warned her not to set her feet at home. She didn't come home that night. She probably slept in the hotel room with her AP. That night, she didn't only lose her marriage. She lost her friend of so many years too. Her best friend, and I decided to post the video online without covering their faces to humiliate her more. We combined the video and the Snapchat location and kept posting them online until many people started sharing them. It was so humiliating for her, especially since most people in her hometown knew her, and her best friend had been friends since high school. It was my first time being so heartbroken, and I was not myself for weeks. Days after I caught her with her best friend's husband, she tried to beg me and promised it would never happen again, but everything she said fell on deaf ears. We divorced because I could not stand the shame of being associated with her infidelity. Likewise, her best friend divorced her husband and got custody of their 2 kids. Meanwhile, after the video went viral, my wife could not go out because of the looks she got from people. She couldn't even attend her high school reunion because everyone had seen the video. On my end, I had to move to a different location to start life all over again. Whenever I remember how my wife played on my intelligence and betrayed her friend of more than 15 years, it still surprises me. She didn't value our marriage or her relationship with her friend, and anyone who can do such a thing can do even more terrible things. I know I will not get into another relationship anytime soon because my heart still breaks when I remember how much I loved my wife and how she ruined everything we had. OP, it's always heartbreaking to love someone with all your heart while trying to remain faithful to them, but in the end, they will take your love for granted and mess things up. You have a good point, though. Anyone who can betray her best friend of 15 years is capable of doing something more terrible. I know you haven't moved on, but it's imperative that you do. There's no need to hold on to the memories of your wife if it causes you more pain. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.